Hi, everyone, and welcome to my new show called Out of Nowhere at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific Time, and 8 p.m. in the UK. On today's show, we'll be talking all things strange, including the unexplained, the paranormal, the mysterious. And can we please welcome to my show today, Christopher Cullen. Christopher
Hey.
will discuss the benefit of using frequency for meditation, brainwave entrainment, consciousness expansion. Can we please welcome Christopher to the show? Hello there.
Hey, how you doing, Bob?
I'm doing wonderful. It's so nice to hear your voice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Thank you. So I want to know a bit about brainwave and is it entrainment?
Yes,
Can
and
you tell
trainment.
tell us a little bit about it, please?
Most folks are probably familiar with it without being familiar with it. Binaural beats and binaural beat music has had a huge uptick here in the last 5 years or so. It's been around since the beginnings of the Monroe Institute. They were really the ones that pioneered the work in binaural beat. And the idea of a binaural beat is the fact that we hear binaurally, left and right side. Those also correlate to sides of the brain. And when you feed, let's say, if you had a frequency that you wanted to focus on, like 430 hertz or something like that, to meditate with specifically, your brain can create that frequency if you give it the two frequencies directly around it. So if you wanted 432, for instance, in one ear you would put 431, the other you would put 433. And the offset of those two wobbles, your brain will eventually go, oh, well, this is what you're trying to actually hear, and will offset and give you the desired frequency that you're wanting to hit. And by doing that, your brain is a transducer and a muscle. So it produces all of these frequency ranges regularly whenever you are active, awake, theta waves, delta waves during things like REM sleep, stuff like that. So you can train your brain to create these frequencies more readily by using binaural beat music and basically teaching it to flex that frequency muscle, so to speak, and learn to recognize a frequency faster and even produce that frequency when it needs to produce it.
How did you get into all this then?
I first I was always into hypnosis, things like that, and I first ran across the research of the Monroe Institute. I was doing just reading on some hypnotherapy things and stuff like that at my public library back when I was in high school, and ran across the work of the Monroe Institute and Gansfield goggles specifically. The idea that your brain is a pattern machine and wants patterns. It's looking for patterns, and when you subtract stimulus from it, and the work of Gansfield, basically they put like soft blue goggles on people and removed auditory stimulus. So the only thing you saw was this soft blue field. And eventually your brain started creating geometric patterns, fractals, things like that, uh, just to have stimulation, and to create its own stimulation. So I was fascinated by that, ran across the work of the Monroe Institute, and all of about a year or so later, ended up buying a Voyager XL. I still have it. They used to sell these at the Sharper Image. I ran across this for like $100 at a pawn shop, and I remember saving like crazy for
Oh
it.
my God.
But this was my first foray into binaural beats and being able to, like, use brainwave frequencies to give myself 2 hours of rest in 15 minutes, things like that. Uh, and my first use of it in music was, as I went further in binaural beat, as I went further in using that technology with myself, I began finding out that there were a whole range of frequencies. This is really what brought me into my work as an audio engineer and things like that. Was subliminal music and subliminal movies, subliminal artifacts being left in movies to influence the viewer, specifically movies like The Exorcist, things like that, where they used backmasking of certain sounds to feed off the innate fears of human. Um, I found that fascinating. Uh, and I began using these strange frequencies where like it felt like somebody was in the room with you, or it feels like somebody's watching you. There's a whole range of frequencies that make you uncomfortable, unsettled, things like that. So I started hiding those within specific thematic pieces of avant-garde music that I made. Um, and that was really my first foray into it, was to see if that music would emote those feelings to somebody, like, "Ooh, wow, that kind of creeped me out a little bit. That was weird." And for me, that was mission accomplished.
Right.
It wasn't until years later that I actively started using this. I I wouldn't say I was using it for evil, but I was definitely using it for different means than therapy, let's say. I was using it as an artistic way to emote a feeling from somebody.
Do you
um
use, when you're talking about this, before I move on to meditation, do you use it
mhm.
in your when you're doing films or um, stuff like that? When you're doing your music?
When I do my music, yes, I have incorporated, once again, binaural beat and frequency management into and subliminal frequency use into my music for years and years. um even outside of the world of meditation, even outside of the world of avant-garde music. um I guess one of the first
I'm going to
real
say,
meditation out Go ahead.
can you tell us a bit about frequency meditation therapy? How
Sure,
does that
sure,
work?
yeah. Well, kind of in the same way. Our once again, our brain is a transducer, and what that means is that um, it responds to frequencies around it. It responds to pressures around it, things like that. Our body is the exact same way. The prime example would be if if a cat lays on you and starts purring, there is a resonant frequency that happens, that you feel instead of hearing. You know, and many of those frequencies, 8 hertz, things like that, have been shown to actively have therapeutic use in post-surgery wards, that kind of stuff, where they've actively pumped frequencies into the room in burn wards and shown faster healing response in patients, things like that. Very much like the studies that were done with plants in music years and years ago, where
Hmm.
different music affects the way that plants grow in a different way. And it's interesting to even hear that classical music. It was all of a few years ago, before um, what was that, Mythbusters on Discovery Channel repeated a lot of that experiment, and they found it very interesting that the plants grew and flourished not only in the presence of classical music but in the presence of heavy metal, which I found
Yeah.
interesting because they both use a lot of the same scales and modes, things like that. So it was very interesting to see that um, those frequencies and those frequency ranges affect things the same way. A prime example is the idea that frequency is light. We see and hear a very small slice of the magnetic spectrum, and our frequency range of sight and frequency range of hearing overlap a little bit. They're both within the range of the same area, and to know that there is a sound to the color red, like this is the source of chakras, things like that. to know that frequencies themselves affect color, and that color itself can affect your mood. Things like that can affect the way your body reacts to things. It's pretty fascinating stuff once you start digging into it, Bob.
What about animals? They pick frequency up.
I'm sorry, you broke up for a second there, my friend.
Oh, sorry.
No
Can
worries.
animals pick frequency up?
Oh, absolutely. They are far more sensitive to frequency than we are. And I'll give you a prime example right here. Um I'll pop up a picture on my screen. This is actually a picture that I took recently in Salem, Massachusetts, at Proctor's Ledge, where sadly all of the witch hangings actively took place. Um you can see all the stones there, everything else. Now, this is with one camera that I have. This is with the exact same model camera that I use for astrophotography, that has had the filter stripped off of it. So made for full spectrum. This is much more akin to like what a parrot would see, where
Right.
you are seeing into the near infrared, near ultraviolet, things like that, where the protective stops of the filters that make things natural for our eye are actively removed. This is what I use to, take spirit photography. It's what I use to get pictures of nebulas, things like that, so that it filters out different colors and gives you more of the infrared, so you see more of the detail in the clouds. But that's a prime example of exactly how close that shift is to what we see and what we don't see, and the whole while those frequency ranges are affecting us. We are fully affected by that. One of the big examples I give is frequency and flash rate. The lights that we're looking at, most incandescent lights operate at 60 hertz, which means that they are technically flashing 60 times per second. That is almost twice as fast as our eyes see, which is why fluorescent lighting makes you tired, things like that. Why you start getting
Hmm.
migraines and eye strain, things like that under that kind of lighting. HD TV does the same thing. When your parents called it the idiot box, like, oh, that thing's hypnotizing you. Like, it actively was.
I
We
suppose if you
it
go on your computer a lot, Chris, if you go on the computer a lot, it will tire you then.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. Now we're talking about a HD screen as opposed to a tube television that operated at 30 hertz, 30 frames per second was the frame rate of video. That is pretty close to what our eye operates at, which is why they were able to pop in one frame of a subliminal picture, like drink Coke back in the day. Our subconscious would see that, but to the naked eye, like you're talking one frame out of 30 per second. It's going to be a passing moment if you see it. The detail will not be there. So the same thing happens with our brain when we're looking at HD. The only difference is now you're talking double that frame rate. You're talking a refresh rate of 60 hertz or 120 hertz. That's 4 times as fast that you go into that zombified brain state sitting there watching a 4K video. Like it's pretty magnificent when you start thinking about it. Like that cooling response of your
There's Johnny,
brain.
Johnny's in the chat room. Can you get the chat room? If you go on,
Um,
yeah, she said,
I don't know. Let me
if
see.
you go on
Oh, there we
comments,
go.
I'm
Oh, I
finding
think
listening to
hold on. Here
5
we
times very beneficial. Janice in the chat
uh,
rooms asking a question.
okay, there we go. Oh yeah, yeah. No, 528 is a fantastic one. That is right up around crown chakra, things like that. So that is there are whole ranges of hertz, megahertz, things like that. And that's once again what a lot of people do not realize is that um the electromagnetic spectrum is once again, that slice of visible light right there is is right within the world of what we see and hear. There is an entire universe all around us, and each one of these colors uh, actively relates to a frequency, to a hertz frequency that you can hear or feel. When you're talking about things like Schumann resonance, stuff like that, like earth vibrations, that's like 7.8 hertz. That is well below the typical range of human hearing. The closest thing you'll hear is it's like a slow click almost. Um, at that point, it's such a low
I know if
beat
you're doing,
frequency.
Chris, if you do a paranormal event, sometimes you go into a
Mm,
place, you go, "Oh God, I don't feel right in here tonight." Is that
yeah.
frequencies we're feeling then?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because all of those things lie within that electromagnetic spectrum right there. So yes, even though it might be outside of the range of us being able to see it or hear it, it doesn't mean it is outside of the range of us to be able to perceive it or feel it. Much like the cat's purr that you might not be able to hear, but if they're laying next to you, you can feel the vibration of it happening. One of the things I've been speaking about regularly on not only shows like this but my own is the idea that, especially when you're talking about experiencers of UFO, experiencers of craft abduction, um they have been exposed to a different technology than what we have here on our planet, and or even in our time or dimension, depending on which way you choose to look at the UFO UAP situation.
Hmm.
uh, and I akin that very much to a mechanical watch and a magnet. you know if you take a watch and put it near a magnet, if you put it close enough for long enough, it'll never work again. But if you put it in the presence of that magnet, it'll begin to lose time, and it'll always lose time until it is demagnetized. So much in the same way that watch is changed and the metal in that is aligned in a different way. When you have been exposed to these technologies, you are now aligned in a different way, Bob. And it's really interesting when you start digging into case files, when you start digging into experiencers, the number of people that, after an experience like that, begin to experience other paranormal phenomena in their life, almost as though they have been shifted into a different state of visualization, into a different state of sensitivity to these things. So yeah, the paranormal world is uh literally just outside of us. It's right there, and to to think that we do not participate in it, I think is I don't know. I think is a little naive when you get down to straight ninth grade science, and the idea that we are right now, you and I, despite being across the big pond from each other, my friend, we are quite literally sharing an electron shell by all known physics. We are all 90% empty space. So to think that our electrons don't regularly bounce into another dimension, come back, go somewhere else, come back, make it all the way to Saturn and come back. Um, I think that's a little naive to think, just in all actual realm of real physics, you know.
Tell us about a bit about ancient cultures and their use of frequencies.
They they were tied into the world in a different way. And if you look back at our great grandparents' generation, they very much had some of the same ways. Back in the days when the sun went down, it was just dark unless you had fat lamps. You know, unless you had some way of having fire inside your home, it was dark. You were tied to the earth and tied to the cycles of it in a totally different way. And especially when you start looking at ancient cultures, megalithic cultures, they understood the physics of rocks, crystals in a totally different way, and especially the physics of vibration. When you start looking at places like Malta, um, where the chambers there are known to resonate at very specific frequencies, pretty close to actually 528, pretty close to the crown chakra, and these are places that are used for meditation, used for initiation, things like that. Even when you start looking at ancient Greek sites, especially places like Epidaurus, stuff like that, the ancient theaters, um, they had an amazing knowledge of sound and the way that sound traveled, the way that it was amplified by nature around it. All of those places were built with very specific dimensions. And Epidaurus specifically, I remember going there. I was like 19 during my semester in Rome, but I remember our history professor standing down in the middle of the theater. They were all certified tour guides, so we got pretty cool access. It was nice. But we were sitting up at the top of the theater. He was where the stage would have been, and he struck a match, and it literally sounded like that wooden match was 2 feet away from me. Like it sounded like it
Oh
was
my
right
God.
there next to me. That is the precision of audio that they had, and the knowledge of audio and frequencies and frequency manipulation. It's very
What
remarkable.
about
And
what
when you
ab-
go
Chris?
ahead,
What about the pyramids then? They Were
oh,
they used as some frequencies?
that is a going hypothesis that I am actively working on, because I say it on my show regularly. If that was a tomb, if the Great Pyramid was a tomb, whoever it was made for did some horrible, horrible things, and they never wanted them to achieve the afterlife. Because there are no inscriptions in the king's chamber where the sarcophagus is, none. So you weren't going to have your heart weighed by Set, if you didn't have the inscriptions from the Book of the Dead on the wall to read as you woke up. So it was obviously used for something else. Now, my hypothesis, especially given the the two tubes, of the air shafts, and being slightly offset from each other, being slightly off distance lengthwise from each other, uh, I consider the possibility that that king's chamber actively resonated in a binaural beat type of way. There were baffles inside of the shafts that actively could control airflow. So if you think about that in the fact of kind of like a straw, where you can turn it into a slide whistle if you adjust the height of it while you blow across it, you could very much tune the chamber in the same way, with just the passing wind at the height that the holes for the shafts are at. So I hypothesized the fact that yes, it was actually used to control the frequency of the chamber that would then be resonated by the granite around it and by the quartz inside of the granite. So basically controlling a pressure wave that would activate the piezoelectric qualities of the granite and affect the people inside of the chamber. So
Well, I suppose
that's
it's
my
like the
hypothesis
paranormal.
with frequencies in the Great Pyramid.
Brilliant. Yeah, it sounds good. That does. What
I,
about
I, I am
frequency
I'm trying to
shifts
have a what's that?
and the
Frequencies and what?
what about frequency shifts with the paranormal
Well,
in
that
different
goes that
areas?
goes yeah, that goes right back along to the same thing with people being shifted. Places and events are shifted in the same way. There are numerous places, especially when you start looking at crop circles, things like that. Um, there are numerous frequency shifts in the presence of those where they cannot explain the magnetic anomaly that occurs, the frequencies, the white noise, that kind of stuff. It's pretty remarkable, and that in and of itself, to think that yes, the same way that your proximity to a radar dish would affect you or affect your brain, the proximity to a location where frequencies are awry, be it by uh some kind of radiative means from nature or magnetic anomaly, what have you, even electrostatic anomalies from things like holes in the ozone layer, stuff like that. Like right now, we are under a huge, massive geomagnetic storm to the point that northern lights were seen in Amarillo, Texas, 4 nights ago. Like that's unheard of. There was
We've
a hole that
we've
was just
seen them
ripped into.
where I live on the
Yeah,
northeast coast of Bridlington,
yeah,
not the Iceland, off our coast.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. And I mean, there was just a whole sunspot like 3 times the size of the United States or something like that that ripped up. It was huge. It was a massive solar flare and solar spot that happened. So, um, all of these things are affected. Even once again, the idea that light is both a particle and a wave uh, is remarkable to think about, which just brings back the point that light in and of itself is a frequency. It affects the way that we are. Ask anybody that lives in a light deprived state like Alaska or Maine. When I lived in Maine for 5 years, I had always laughed at the idea of seasonal affective disorder. SAD. Um, but it happens, and it's because the infrared light from the sun does not get through your skull to your pineal gland, and it just starts messing with your emotions. The fact that you do not have a regulated amount of sunlight going on, like all of these things are things, Bob, that our ancestors did not have a problem with. They didn't have a problem with not getting enough sunlight. Like they were out tending fields, they were out hunting, they were outside all day long working, things like that. It's not until our modern society that we have quite literally lost connection with these things, that now we need a farmer's almanac. I don't recall my grandfather necessarily needing one to know when to put his radish seeds in the ground. Like he farmed his whole life. He knew the area, he knew the cycles. He knew when the fish were biting and what they were biting on, because they'd been biting on that for 30 years during that time of the year. It's not until now that we have lost connection with that concept. The one thing I say regularly is you would be hard pressed right now to go out with a piece of timber and ask somebody to hand carve you a column. Like, I need a spiral column for my doorway. Here's a chunk of wood. 60, 70 years ago, you probably could have gone out and gotten a couple quotes locally, from a handcrafted wood craftsman. That is a technology that we have all but lost within a lifetime. I'm Cajun by upbringing. South Louisiana. That is one of the only languages that is actively native to the United States. Native. It has taken one generation, Bob. There were pictures from my grandparents' generation of, the dunce kid sitting in the corner because he was speaking Cajun French in class instead of English. Things like that. It was spanked out of them in school. Things like that. And now you are hard pressed to find anybody who is my mother's age or below, who can actively speak the Cajun French language. One generation. That's all it took to forget an entire language. So to think that, that this 1 terabyte thumb drive that I'm holding has all kinds of schematics. I could build computers, all kinds of things with the schematics I have on here. But if I go out and lose it on the beach and it's dug up 50 years from now, will those kids even know what the heck a thumb drive is? Go show a 13-year-old an 8-track tape. Like we lose track of these things rapidly. So to think that we
Yeah.
haven't lost our society, that we haven't lost our humanity and our technology 5, 10, 20 times over, yeah, like we've definitely lost touch with what these frequencies are and what they do and why they do it. Whereas our ancient relatives were fully in touch with that. It was a part of their daily life.
Yeah, I tell you what, Janice is in the chat room.
Okay, Janice.
If you have a look there, I
Sure.
think all strange phenomena are linked together in some way due to free telluric current, Earth's natural
Yeah.
electric currents.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you're talking about ley lines, things like that, most definitely, there has been shown a great correlation between these. I mean, is correlation proof? Absolutely not. But there is a crap ton of correlation out there. It's kind of like when my favorite is Graham Hancock. I love Graham Hancock. He's absolutely awesome. He's a dream interview for me. But when people rail on him like, oh, your research isn't founded, he's like, research? I don't research. I'm a journalist. I'm not a scientist. I'm just going where the evidence points me, and this is where the evidence is pointing. Like, I have zero vested interest in this making it or not making it because my career is not science. I'm a journalist. So it's interesting to see people like him seeing these correlations, seeing the fact that, yes, ancient civilizations, everything from India to Mayan to Native American, they were all well aware of these things. Cambodian, they were all well aware of them. And when you start looking at that, when you start looking at the nature of frequency, you literally start seeing the fractal nature of nature. It's pretty remarkable that you start getting things like squares, you start getting things like triangles, stuff like that, because that is the root of sound and synthesis, is those sounds. I'm busy working on an album right now that kind of ties petroglyphs across the world together, uh, because I have this idea that many of the people, if you look at a lot of petroglyphs from around the world, they have many tribal symbols on them that are very similar, square shaped patterns, sawtooth patterns, patterns that seem to represent water. Sometimes those are in a desert, which is really interesting. Um, but myself, as an electronic musician, um, I started taking these, tracing them out in Photoshop, and then putting them through algorithms. And they are actual synthesized sounds. They are sawtooth patterns for synthesizers, sine waves, that kind of stuff. So my hypothesis is perhaps all of these people that made these were actual synesthetes, that had synesthetic qualities to them, and they were just drawing the sounds that they were hearing in the world around them. So and some of these sounds are pretty spacey when you start listening to them. But
I'm going to say
that
because some people use sound healing for healing.
yeah, no, there is not a single ancient culture that did not have sacred song in some way, shape, or form, where there wasn't a tradition of story being told through song, that song wasn't used for healing in some way by shamanic chanting, what have you. So yeah, the idea of frequency being used for healing, frequency being used to bring you to an ecstatic state. Even the chanting, and a lot of people don't realize, Bob, that even dancing in and of itself, the repetitive motion of your body can bring you into a proper hypnotic state. That's how Sufi mystics got there. That was the secret of the whirling dervishes, all kinds of things. So even that begins to change the frequency and pattern in which your brain operates, because of the pattern in which your feet are stomping. and the number of beats per second. Um, it's really interesting. Our whole life is nothing but frequency. Every bit of it. Every bit of it.
You know, that sometimes I've gone to paranormal investigations and we've seen like a white light appear in the middle of a field and there's no
Mm.
signs there, no nothing. Is that some sort of frequency we're seeing then?
It could definitely be the fact, especially frequencies that affect the chromatophores in your eyes. Very high order frequencies, things like that. When you start getting up toward X-ray range, that kind of stuff, into radio waves, everything else right over here. That is on either side of that with intensity. Yes, you will start to see spots in front of your eyes. You'll start to see very much the same way that MRI patients report kind of a near death experience and seeing the tunnel of light sometimes just because of the magnetic resonance going on in their brain. So yeah, if there was some sort of magnetic, hard magnetic phenomena, radiative phenomena, something like that, yes, it could either manifest a light or even make your eyes see a light, just by affecting the water in your eyes through frequency and vibration.
Very interesting subject. Tell us about some of your personal paranormal experiences.
You know, I've had a few in my life. The one that rings to me all the time is one that happened all of a couple few years ago. I was speaking at a podcasting conference with a friend, Jared McClellan, and he was busy actually getting ready to start a paranormal podcast. You know, just people telling their paranormal stories. Uh, and in honor of that, he had stayed at the Menger Hotel in San Antonio for this conference. He was like, I got a room at the Menger. I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's like one of the most haunted hotels in America. Good for you. He's like, well, you want to come by after the conference, maybe have a drink, and we'll, hit the room and do an episode record. It's like, okay. So we went, we got things ready in his room and everything, went downstairs to have a drink. And when we came back, it was the weirdest thing in the world, Bob. There was a single spot of blood on the bed cover. It was not there when we came and set up gear. You're like, that's crazy. He removed his bed cover. We sat down, we recorded our interview, and when we were done, while we were just sitting there and decompressing and talking, behind me was the bathroom, and old crystal doorknob, pretty distinct sounds.
Oh yeah.
The doorknob physically turned. This was not a shared bathroom. Nobody on the other side. The doorknob physically turned and the door swung open. Nobody in the bathroom. We just kind of acknowledged whoever was there. Like, hey, how you doing? Hope you're having as great a night as we are. We have no ill intent toward you. I went to leave from my hotel. He stayed the night. As I left, I found an old security guard that was sitting downstairs, and he had apparently worked there 20, 30 years on night shift. I told him where it happened. He was like, oh yeah, that's one of the big happening floors. He's like, there was a family all of 3 weeks ago that came down at about this time, and they just checked out. They weren't even having it. Like, we'll go find a hotel at 2 a.m., but we ain't staying here anymore. It was pretty remarkable. That was one of the paranormal experiences that sticks with me more than anything, because that door was not ajar. It was not partially open. There's no air conditioning in the room, so it's not like suddenly there was like a suction of air, from an air intake or something like that would pop a door open. Like, That door was completely closed, man, and that doorknob friggin' turned. Like that was one of the most crazy experiences of my life. To see that just like turn completely and open up. Like I've got goosebumps right now thinking about it.
Did you
And
watch it?
even to
Did
this
you watch
day,
it
it was.
turning as well?
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Did you watch it turning?
Yeah. Oh
Did
yeah.
you
No,
watch the
like
handle
we
turning?
heard the doorknob, because it's one of those old brass structures with the crystal doorknob on the front. Like they're rackety, they're loud. When you
Yeah.
touch them, they just kind of move, and that's what we heard. And it was like, what's that? And we turned around, and that's when it started turning. It was like, that's moving. It's like, yeah, no, that's moving. Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, we're both seeing it move. Wow. Wow. Um, yeah. And to this day, I don't know why. I've been on paranormal investigations myself. I've seen some odd things, and I've definitely had the fear at investigations where it's like, yeah, I don't need to go down that hallway right now. Where it's like something in my gut tells me like I need to turn around and go there. That was not the feeling I had here. Even with seeing that manifest in front of me, there was not a overwhelming feeling of fear, dread, anything like that. It was more like, wow, this is happening right now. Like I can't believe that this is actually happening. Um, so yeah. Aside from that, there was one
Yeah,
instance.
I've been out. Go on.
Go ahead.
You carry on.
Oh no, I
No, I've
was
been
just gonna.
out on a paranormal investigation on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gone on my own and felt as though I was being watched. And I never get scared, but that night I just wanted to get away from that place. And that was
Yeah.
outside in the dark. I felt as though somebody was watching me.
Yep. Yeah.
And I thought, bloody hell, I'm going to have to get away. And I shouted to my mate Paul, I went, Paul, here, you need to walk me back, really. And I've
Wow.
never been like that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And when the first experience I ever remember having, Bob, um, I was a young kid. This memory lives sealed in my mind. We lived in a little trailer house out in East Houston, Crosby, Texas. Um, and on the back side of our house was our neighbor, Miss Pat. My brother would go to school. I was basically at home. Miss Pat would watch me. She'd watch my brother after school till mom got home from work. I'd help Miss Pat gather the chicken eggs out in the yard, all kinds of things. But between Miss Pat's house and our trailer was a rickety old swing set, like stop hanging out on the bars. You're going to get tetanus. Old swing set. Um, like paint peeling off of it, things like that. And I remember looking out one day at Miss Pat's house, and standing by the swing set was a dark figure, with what I know to be horns on its head, beckoning at me to come out to the swing set. And that is the first shot of terror that I remember in my life, where I was frozen in fear of whatever that was. I was a young kid, man, like 5 years old, something like that. Um, I don't know if it's a proper memory. I have no idea, but it is one of those that I have never forgotten, or the feeling that it gives me inside. And that is still akin to me very much with don't go down that hallway. Like that is the feeling I get where it's like something is amiss, something is not right, and I listen to that more than anything else in my life. When I feel that feeling, I'm like you were that night, Bob. I want to get up out of there, and I'm a pretty stout individual otherwise. Like I'm pretty stalwart.
Yeah,
But
same here.
there are moments. Yeah.
When
Yeah.
people talk about Bigfoot and everything, they say they see it, and then next minute it vanishes. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is that a frequency then?
There's a couple of different hypotheses that I have. I am not the immediate one to go to a dimensional being in that way, where like the physical entity Sasquatch is an interdimensional being. I don't know about that. Could very well be. Um, there is a good cadre of evidence out there, especially new evidence, for there being an actual hominid species in the forests of North America, possibly beyond. I am one who I firmly believe in the actual existence of Sasquatch and other Sasquatch type creatures across the globe. Um, Fully believe in that. We have found more than one. I mean, heck, when did we discover pandas and how long was China there? Like when did we discover lowland gorillas? Like all of these things are in the scope of history of mankind, pretty recent discovery, much less the living fossils that we have found and the things that we know made, like the platypus lived with the dinosaurs. That mammal made it out.
Mm.
There's more than one situation where critters made it out of a great extinction, or that we thought a creature was extinct, and lo and behold, here's this animal we thought was gone for the last 80 years that's suddenly been photographed. We even during the mass pandemic of COVID, we discovered like 3,000 new species. So we
Amazing.
we are regularly discovering species. Now, when it comes to Bigfoot, paranormal, I also believe that there is another adjoining realm right near ours, Bob. Um, you can not believe in evil things if you want to, but let me tell you, folks, they fully believe in you. Um, I, I don't care if you're agnostic, not if you're a Christian going person or not, Buddhist or not. Uh, there are evil things out in the universe. There are mal entities and mal spirits, and they are more than willing to use the tropes in your head to garner your consent. Because they can't touch you without consent. They can torment you without consent. They can do all kinds of things without consent, but they can't touch you and do other things without consent. So to be able to, let's say, and even the idea of preparing to go out on an investigation, Bob, you really have to question, um, are you actively charging the area that you're getting ready to go to with your own intent?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
That's a good one you're talking about. There's many people come up and said, charge my camera up. He's charged
yeah.
his camera up. We've come to visit you, and my camera's gone dead.
Well, it's not just that, but are you possibly communicating with the other side without intending to? One of the things that has it literally quantum entanglement. It won the Nobel Prize last year. The idea that particles can influence each other despite distance. This is the root of things like remote viewing, where that started with a paper from a laser scientist named Hal Puthoff. At least the controlled remote viewing in a lab did, and the idea that scientists were affecting their experiments by thinking about them when they went home. Now, when you think about that and you start thinking about preparing to go out to a haunted location, should you be thinking about it as a haunted location? Or are you possibly affecting the location now by putting that thought form out there? Should you be blanking your mind as much as possible while you're preparing equipment
Mm.
for a 48-hour investigation? Probably, instead of getting zazzed up about going to the place where the demons are. I heard there are demons. I heard there's this. Like you're quite literally setting yourself up for for that psychological play, and to even be seeing something through that lens without looking at it objectively from a research point of view. So we have to be careful with that whenever we are individually doing research, and make sure that we aren't casting those things out there, and that maybe that manifestation is because of what our expectation is. And also the horrible reality of, good God, what if there's some horrible entity that is just reading your mind and going, well, they'd be perfectly happy if they saw a Bigfoot, but they'd be freaked as hell if they saw me. So poof, now suddenly
Well,
it's a Bigfoot,
that's true.
you
And
know?
that's what can happen. I think there's hot spots around the world, in every place, in every county, every
Yeah.
state, where you can
Yeah.
go. And what happens, the frequency either goes very low or too high or whatever, and we seem to grab into it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, once again, there have been, I talk about things like targeted individuals, stuff like that on my show. And there is a whole cadre of technology out there that uses these kind of frequencies to make you feel that way, to make you feel like somebody is watching you, to literally drive you to a point. Same thing with psychological driving, like what we did with Manuel Noriega, where it's like we're gonna blast music 24/7 and horrible frequencies until he just wants to give up because he can't sleep anymore. And yeah,
Can
you
you
have to
remember?
wonder.
I'll tell you what's a good one. I can remember Uri Geller. I can't remember
Mm,
now, maybe 25 years ago. There'd been no rain in Australia. And he said, right, I want everybody to think for rain. And it rained.
yeah, yeah. And it's pretty remarkable when you start getting into things like manifestation, Bob, stuff like that. The idea of being able to influence the world around you. You can. Once again, we're sharing an electron shell. You are sharing an electron shell with the desk around you, with the chair that you're sitting in. We are all basically living in an agreed upon illusion. It's pretty massive to think about when you stop and think about that. The idea that we are a frequency that will carry on beyond this assemblage of atoms, you know? That's beautiful and remarkable to think about, to know that we exist and participate in the universe in a totally different way than what we are taught in school, than what we're taught in faith or religion class or in church. We participate in the universe in a beautiful way, Bob. It's really amazing. And once you start to see that and tune into that, and tune into your own frequency, and the way that your frequency, like a ripple, affects others around it, um, you start to change. You start to change the way you think about things a little bit.
We're not far off finishing the show. Tell us
Hmm.
about your own podcast, The Curious
Well,
Realm. What's that all
Curious
about?
Realm, uh, Curious Realm started out many years ago under a different name called Dudes and Beer. And the idea was, these topics are out there. Most people are very uncomfortable having this conversation, man. Like the average person doesn't want to talk about these things. They don't want to talk about UFOs, UAPs. They don't want to talk about um, possible critters that are reading your mind and maybe appearing as your grandmother instead of themselves in your house. But they're out there. The stories are out there. The research is out there. And they're conversations that have to be had. And whether we agree on them or not doesn't really matter. The important thing is that we're willing to have the conversation. That is what furthers humanity, is the fact that I am willing to empathetically listen to you, your experience, and why you are the way you are without wanting to change your paradigm. without wanting to change the way you think because you are the beautiful Jim you are because of the beautiful Jim you are, and we've kind of lost that concept. Uh, America was founded in a bar by a bunch of people who, I mean, the public house, you know, everybody goes there, whether it's the mayor, the pig farmer, doesn't matter. Everybody goes to the public house. Famous people go to the public house. Poor people go to the public house. It's the public house. Um, but gathered together, all those people of different walks of life, of different religious backgrounds, of different beliefs, different social mores and morals, all agreed, whatever that thing is, we don't want that. We got to get rid of that. And very few people took place in that revolution. The great overwhelming majority of American populace did not take part in that. But that's not, you don't need the great amount to overcome. You just need the right amount and the right number of, and the right people to overcome. So
Yeah.
waking people up to that became my mission. Waking people up to the idea that there is a change coming, and I don't care what religious background you are. I don't care what philosophic background you are. To ignore the fact that we are at a roiling point of society. Like you can't throw another frog in this pot. They're going to be on to it. There is something happening amongst humanity right now that is coming to a head, and we need to be more enlightened, Bob. We need to put differences aside and be willing to have the conversation. Because if we're not willing to have it now, we're going to be hip deep come time to have it, and that's going to be a much bigger problem for our species and for humanity and for the sake of humanity on this planet. Quite literally. I mean, societies and civilizations have ended, and they thought they were ready. They'd made the sacrifices they needed to make, animal, what have you. But things still happened. So are we ready for that change as a humanity? Are we ready? Are we ready for ET to have the conversation with us? Or are they locking the doors
Exactly.
as they
Are
go
we?
by the planet? Like, oh man, don't go near that neighborhood. Like, they shoot at you, man. Like, like in all sincerity. And we have to be willing to look at our own shortcomings, not only as people, but as humanity, and be willing to get past that, be willing to see each other in an empathetic light, and want to know why, and want to have that exploration into our own humanity and why. So that's what my show Curious Realm is all about. We talk to authors, researchers, everything from Knights Templar to paranormal to we just had the MUFON director of international investigations on this last Tuesday. Things like that, just to explore and poke and prod humanity and find out where we're going and why, and to expose people to this research, to these researchers who are out there, that they are studying near death. They are studying near death experiences. They are trying to communicate with the other side. They like, it's remarkable, some of the things that are out there. And sadly, these are not the sexy topics for the news, Bob. Like,
It's not.
yeah, the fact that they actively made matter from light barely made the news cycle. Barely. Like 3 years ago, they made matter. That is 18 steps away from going, replicator, give me a coffee black. Like, we made matter from light. That should be huge. That should be groundbreaking.
It should.
But nobody's paying attention. So that's what the show's about. That's what Curious Realm is not only our exploration of those topics, but what do we do with it now? What are the caveats? What are the possibilities? So It's a beautiful exploration on humanity and many of the esoteric topics that are sadly hidden from people throughout their lives. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It's been absolutely riveting. A lot of people in the chat room have always said, great guest tonight.
Thank you.
You know, to Chris and Bob. Everybody's saying, awesome show. Let's have him back on again.
Absolutely. I'm always here for conversation. That is what moves us forward.
Exactly, exactly. So thank you very much. It's been absolutely great. I've enjoyed it tonight.
Same.
It's something different to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway,
it's always fun. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah. And have a lovely weekend. And I will catch up with you very soon again. And we'll have you back on again.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Good night and God bless. Bye.
Same. Stay curious, everybody.
Bye. Just end the stream. Down.